Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, I extend you my best wishes on the occasion of the World Environmental Education Congress in Gothenburg, Sweden. And I would like to congratulate the University of Gothenburg and the Chalmers University of Technology through their partnership in hosting this very important event. As many of you know, and as I try to also articulate at the Marrakesh Congress, UNEP's interest and commitment to environmental education remains as strong as ever. The challenge of trying to both empower, motivate and inspire future generations, but also people across the planet on facing the challenges of environmental sustainability at this particular moment in time, but also to give them a sense of confidence to be able to make a difference, to be able to address these issues wherever they may live, whatever context they may be working in or living in, is vital to being able to succeed. As many of you may have heard, the notion of living in the age of the Anthropocene has become an idea that tries to both reflect the challenge and the nature and the scale of what we face today at the beginning of the 21st century, but also to locate our generations in a more historical perspective of the impact of human beings on the planet. In the last 250 years, the impact that we have generated collectively by first of all becoming many more people on the planet, by becoming also more proficient and effective at harnessing the natural resources of this planet, but also through the footprint that we have caused through emissions, pollution, waste that we have produced, has led us to a point where a fundamental rethink is now called for. Living in the age of the Anthropocene is to recognize that the human species is no longer just one species on this planet, but it is increasingly one that is determining the functionality and indeed the viability of our fundamental life support systems, be it in the atmosphere, in the biosphere, or wherever we may be living and practicing and working, and indeed consuming and producing. We are very much aware of the fact that the year 2015 is a year in which the United Nations will be convening a number of very significant conferences and platforms for addressing precisely these challenges. One already lies behind us, Sendai, Japan, that looked at disasters and also our capacity in responding to the challenge of being confronted, first of all, by a greater frequency, very likely, and also extreme nature of natural disasters, and also by confronting the fact that we are many more people living in much more concentrated urban areas and therefore having to face a much more significant fallout from these natural disasters. Secondly, will be a conference on financing for development in Addis Ababa in July, where a development partnership globally is being negotiated on how best we can mobilize resources, help one another across different parts of the world, and also mobilize, if you want, the financial economy of our nations and societies in order to align it better with the Sustainable Development Goals. In September in New York at the High-Level Summit, a new agenda post-2015 for development will be adopted, including a new set of Sustainable Development Goals. The very central signal is that the United Nations is convening a global agenda that is going to be universal, applicable to all countries, all communities, all nations. And it is finally also taking another significant step towards overcoming what perhaps for the last 20 years has been a challenge, the segmentation, or if you want, the putting into different pillars of the economic, social and environmental dimensions of development. Indeed, the integration of these three dimensions is going to be critical in both being able to scale up our efforts, but also to accelerate their implementation. Progress in economic terms at the expense of social equity or environmental sustainability has increasingly become the Achilles heel of development in the 21st century. The Sustainable Development Goals and their outlook in terms of how we will be able to address these challenges collectively, but also individually, is going to be a central part of interpreting that agenda into the future. Finally, in December, perhaps the most immediate and also most dramatic challenge will be addressed at the climate conference in Paris. The need to rethink, retool and redesign our economies into a future pathway that allows us to move both towards low-carbon economies and, as the G7 summit recently acknowledged, into decarbonizing our economies before the end of this century, is going to demand from all of us, whether national representatives, representatives of civil society and the business community, an envisioning of development that is fundamentally challenging and different from the past 200 years. The notion that we can continue to exploit nature, that we can emit and pollute without boundaries and without limits, simply is no longer holding. Many of you are very familiar with the indices and the indicators that lead us to believe that a business as usual scenario is a very dark scenario for the future of development, especially in a world that soon will have 9 billion people having to share, to live together, to consume energy, to produce food in a way that allows us to envisage a future for future generations. Indeed, the challenge of trying to decouple economic development from energy consumption, to make electricity consumption and production become a low-carbon opportunity rather than just a carbon-emitting challenge, but also the phenomenon of how on earth will we feed 8–9 billion people on this planet by 2050, are questions for which we may not yet have all the answers. It is in the core purpose of the United Nations to both bring the latest science to the attention of the public and also thereby contribute to a greater awareness and education both of the challenge, but, and this is my main message for today, of the opportunities to act. Environmental education is both an opportunity as well as a challenge of rethinking our approach. It is about empowering societies, and many of you are on the front line of experiencing how well people do respond to the power of knowledge, not only in the sense of science and learning about our planet, about our communities, but more importantly in triggering in our own minds, beginning with us as individuals, a sense of both responsibility and the capacity to act. Environmental education has been, as a concept, as an objective and an aspiration with us for many decades, and particularly after 1992, the Rio Earth Summit, clearly an integral part of preparing ourselves for this challenge. At the same time, and many of you will be the first ones to acknowledge this, we have not yet managed to make environmental education part of the fabric of our educational system, but also of the knowledge economy of the 21st century. The ability to scale up these efforts, to reach the minds and also the hearts of people that will allow anyone, anywhere on this planet to feel that they are part of making these solutions work is critical. We have in recent years particularly concentrated on the tertiary sector of education, and through the Global University Partnership, GUPES have now a network of over 520 universities with whom we are working together to try and make this environmental knowledge base part of the disciplines and also the professional training of virtually every discipline that allows us to enter the labor market. It is also through new means of communication such as MOOCs that we have been able to reach a far greater audience. And these are just two lessons and perhaps two assets that we can contribute to you, the community of environmental educationists who are so fundamental and so critical to the success of a future sustainable development strategy and a post-2015 development agenda. I look forward to both receiving the feedback from your meeting and the guidance of how we in the United Nations Environment Programme can continue to be and aspire to be also a more effective partner in achieving this scaling up of environmental education, both as a resource and also as a catalyst for future implementation of these agendas. I wish you a very successful Congress, and I know that in the city of Gothenburg you do indeed find a live example of a community having taken the challenge of sustainability to heart and putting in place many measures that are pointing to how we could envisage a city of the 21st century to be a role model for sustainable living. Thank you very much.